Jones! And Jones, I'm so scared. It's okay. You're going to have a home inspection. I'm so scared.
Hi, Ann Jones.
Hi, Marguerite. What are we going to talk about today?
How about we talk about home inspections?
How about we talk about how big your flashlight is compared to my flashlight?
It's not the size that matters, Ann Jones. It's the licensure of your home inspector.
So, clients hire a home inspector
Mm-hmm.
to check out the property because
Yes.
we don't do it.
No, I mean, we try to spot the craziness so you don't bother going through the whole offer process on something that's like flagrantly bad.
But it's not your realtor's job to be an expert on the quality of the construction down to the finer points. So you hire a home inspector, and typically here it's going to be between $300 and $400.
Yeah,
you know,
for the average sized home.
Yeah, depending on if it's a condo, single family, and how big it is. And that they don't even get a bonus fee if there's water in the crawl space, which they should.
Or dead things.
Rodents.
Pet
cemetery.
Pythons. I had a home inspector see a python once.
In the crawl space?
Weed. I mean, no longer illegal in Washington
I
State,
was
but
just
at
going
one
to say.
time, that was quite a scandal to find an entire cash crop in the crawl space of someone's rental house.
Who will be unnamed.
Yes.
So you've hired your home inspector. They've come out, and you're going to sign some paperwork, liability. There's guidelines. The state of Washington licenses the home inspector, so they have to perform to specific guidelines.
Yes.
And
They are not allowed to disassemble the house in any way. It is a visual inspection only.
yeah, so if there's something going on with the pipes behind the walls that they can't see, they can't be expected to determine that.
But what they do is they run the water, they turn on the heat, they run the appliances, they check it all out. They make sure that everything is working. Because, I mean, how do you know that you got a problem with the plumbing in your sink? Like, your sink is leaking, so they
Or
check that.
standing water.
Standing water.
So they're going to go through, when do you do the home inspection?
You do the home inspection. It's the first thing you do after you get your contract signed around.
Which is what we call mutual acceptance.
The first
So
day.
everybody signed it and mutual acceptance, and we call that day zero.
Yeah.
So the day it's all signed around and delivered to all the parties is day zero. And here in Washington, we then start typically by default on the inspection agreement a 10-day inspection period. Now, 10 business days, right?
Yes.
Can't end on a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
As realtors, one of the most frequent things we do is count on our fingers how many days we have left in the inspection period.
Yes.
And why do we care so much about how many days are left?
Because if you go past the 10th day and don't ask for what you want,
Bad things can happen.
well, you give up your opportunity to ask for the seller to fix stuff.
You buy the home as is.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll have clients being like, oh yeah, well, maybe I can do it this day or maybe I can do it that day, but I've got to work and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you have to take a couple hours off work and you have to be there. And I really don't like it when clients don't want to attend the inspection. I think it's really important that they go because it's not just the list of all the things that are wrong with the house or could potentially go wrong with the house in the future, like conducive conditions for mold or, rot or whatever. Like, it's not just that. It's orientation. It's
exactly
here's your gas shut off.
Yeah.
Here's your water shut off. Hey, that's actually a $1,000 power flush toilet in a $170,000 house. That happened to me last week. It was awesome.
And even if it's really clean and well put together and the inspection goes swimmingly, it's still a good idea to have that information. It's a chance to learn about how some of those parts work.
And they will give you a report with pictures.
Yeah, make sure you pick somebody who gives you a great printed report, photos, because again, in the excitement and the heat of the moment, or maybe your relief that the inspection goes well, a lot of times you'll forget those details. And
the
so,
little things that you want to be monitoring.
yeah, that you maybe need to maintain. Your inspector tells you about a quirk with the fireplace or something like that. And if you've got that report and you can tuck it away where you can easily reference it along with your closing papers,
Right.
then next year when you've got spring maintenance coming up, you can get back in and access your report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we get to day 10, or in some cases in this hot market, it might be
Day
5 days
five.
or 7 days,
Yeah.
shorter inspection periods, but the default is 10 days. At the conclusion of that 10-day period, you have to have submitted your list to the seller, if anything, of what repairs you want made as a buyer. And then the seller has 3 days to respond back. So from the delivery, again, that's a day 0, 1, 2, 3 days to get back to the buyer in writing as to whether or not they'll repair or address any of those conditions or propose an alternative
Right.
of some sort.
So, like, I'm the buyer and Anne's the seller, and I'm like, hey, Anne, your house is really cute and everything, but you have a leak under the sink, and your fascia board is rotten, and
Fascia board?
Your fascia board is rotten. And you know what else? You know what else, Ann? One of your steps on your deck is also rotten. Fix it.
You know what?
What?
You're buying with a conventional loan, 20% down, so you deal with the steps.
Ain't nobody got
when
time
you
for
get in the
that.
house.
All right.
I'm going to answer you, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get the sink, and you're going to get the fascia board, but you're going to deal with the deck.
Done. Let's get that appraisal going.
So 3 days after, I, as the seller, respond to Marguerite, she has 3 days to get back to me and let me know if she's going to accept that proposal, propose an alternative one, or terminate the agreement. So
I'm out of here.
The
you
buyer,
keep your rotten step,
and
Jones.
this is a really important thing because the buyer has the power to terminate the agreement in that time period. The seller doesn't. All the seller can do is say no, and a lot of times buyers are worried, well, if I ask for something, can they cancel the agreement? If I ask for something, are they going to kill the deal?
Your buyers worry about that? My buyers never seem to worry about that. My buyers are like, give me the moon. And I'm like, all right, let's go try and get it.
So
Which brings me to another...
Who has that power?
Which brings me to another point. Sellers, if you're watching, just calm down a little bit on the inspection, okay? Like, we're going to ask for some things. Sometimes the buyer is the first-time buyer, and they want...
everything.
The switch plate covers to match. God, I don't even know what they want. Sometimes they want some crazy stuff. And try not to get, like, super, like, wound up. Oh, you know,
that's a process.
That's grandpa's vintage stove and we love it or whatever. Like, just try to, like, be like, okay, they want this stuff. We're not going to do all that stuff.
And again, I mean, we're in the midst of a changing market. So
Yeah.
for a while, I mean, for several years, buyers could ask for anything that they wanted to.
Yeah.
And sellers were sort of at their mercy. And we're not so much there anymore.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, if you've been on the market for, I mean, it depends on how long you've been on the market. If you've been on the market 2 or 3 months and they want some nitpicky stuff that's not going to cost you all that money, that just seems dumb to you, just do it.
But this is a great reason for sellers in particular to do some of the things. We've got an earlier video on getting your home ready to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Do some of those things in advance so that you are confident that your home is secure and prepared.
Absolutely.
And that way, when the inspection happens, if they do ask for the switch plates, you can politely decline and say you know that all the systems are in good working order.
You do your own switch plates.
Because your lender is only going to be concerned with health and safety type items, and depending on what type of financing a buyer has, certain things will fall into different categories. But let's go back to our timelines.
Right.
So we have 10 days initially.
Yep.
Okay. Then there are 3 days once the buyer submits their request to the seller. Seller has 3 days to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the seller answers the buyer, there's an additional 3 days to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And at the conclusion of that period, everything has to be worked out or else the buyer purchases the home as is. Okay. One other thing we should talk about. Do you have to have a reason to terminate based on the inspection contingency?
I always like to think one up.
You may want to get creative, but you don't have to provide a fatal flaw with the property. So on the buyer side,
There's always something.
there's always something you can, but it's not required. There is one box that you check that says buyer terminates this agreement. The inspection is disproved, and the agreement is terminated.
Earnest money refunded to
Buyer, and that's the key part. And so on the selling side, sellers I think are keenly aware that an inspection period is sort of a free look-see for the buyer, and they're going to be looking for the most competitive offers, perhaps with reduced inspection periods, or maybe buyers who have shown that they've already taken a good look at the property.
When the buyer finds something during the inspection,
This is an important one.
that is really bad. So let's say Ann Jones has the house listed, me and my buyers come in, we do a sewer inspection. Oh, for gosh sakes, it looks like the sewer line has collapsed and the craziness is backing up. And
we just had no idea.
It's been working. I mean, like, we've been flushing the toilet. It seems to be working fine. Well, doom. Doom is coming.
Right.
Yeah, and the buyers discover this when they put a camera down the line and checked it out. Okay, so what does that mean for the seller? We say to the seller, hey, seller, would you mind fixing that?
And if the seller gets all uppity and says
I'll just put it back on the market.
It's worked fine, I'll put it back on the market, there's a serious problem here.
You can't actually do that. Now you have knowledge of what is called
a material defect.
And you know what? Even if you, the seller, do not want to tell anybody, your
agent
is required. There are fines. There's not jail time, but there are fines.
There should be.
No non-disclosure of poops. Yes, your seller must, your sellers and the agent, they have to list that defect in the agent remarks
Because
for the buyer. So
and there's a seller disclosure statement that the sellers here in Washington are required to complete.
has
and
the basement ever leaked? Has the roof ever leaked?
In the last 5 years.
In the last 5 years.
And it doesn't have to be something necessarily as dramatic as poops in the basement. It could be something a little more straightforward, but if it is a material defect, it's something that affects the value of the property, you have to disclose it. And so the buyer has a little bit of leverage in the fact that if we say no to their request to repair or replace the sewer line, when we put that home back on the market, we are obligated to tell the next buyer that there is a problem here.
It'll be tainted.
Maybe we're better off to negotiate with
Work
them
something out.
and keep the deal going.
Get her going. Get her fixed.
But the inspection period provides a lot of protection to the buyer. Make sure they're getting a property. Don't waive your inspection unless you absolutely feel confident in what you're doing. It's a big right to give away.
I've one time in my entire 8 years has a client waived an inspection.
But I know
Cash buyer on a $40,000 house.
In
He was
Seattle-
buying it for the garage.
Right, and in Seattle's market though, I mean they are pre-inspecting and waiving and doing all of that because
Okay, but
things are so crazy.
Pre-inspecting before you make an offer
Is a different story
than waiving it. And if you're a first-time buyer, I just feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what the market's doing. Like, get in there.
So hire an inspector.
Mm-hmm.
Go to your inspection if you possibly can.
Absolutely.
Follow up on any items that seem concerning. And you also, the other thing is when you're in your inspection period, you can have as many people as you want to your inspection. So if you don't invite your whole family.
Be respectful and take your shoes off.
Yes, but more I was thinking if you know, for instance, that a house has knob and tube wiring and you're concerned about that.
Bring the electrician.
Yeah, bring them to your inspection. Bring your HVAC specialist. That's, one other important item. We talked about poop in the basement. If you're in a property that has a septic tank, so we do, I've got one in University Place right now that has a septic tank. Not all city properties are on sewer. And in Gig Harbor, we have lots of septics. The seller is obligated to pump the septic within 10 days of mutual acceptance.
Check it out.
And
Get
make sure
certification.
everything's working okay, and then they have to get that certified through the county. That is their expense. Otherwise, all inspection items are the
On the buyer.
responsibility of the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So your home inspection, you need to be accounting for that $300 to $400, couple $100 to inspect a sewer line,
Mm-hmm.
which is always advisable.
Absolutely.
But the exception to that is a septic tank, and the seller has to pay to have the tank pumped, and then you get to review that report, make sure everything looks good.
Awesome.
I always feel like something